Solidity learning, R. Revert, Assert, and require in Solidity, and the new Revert opcode in the EVM. Upcoming changes to Solidity and how they function. Crosspost. This post was originally written by Maurelian of Consensus and can be found here. This was posted with his permission. Enjoy. The release of Solidity version 0.4.10 introduced the Assert. Require and Revert functions, and confusion has reigned ever since. In particular, the Assert. And Require guard functions improve the readability of contract code, but differentiating between them can be quite confounding. In this article, I'll explain the problem these functions solve, discuss how the Solidity compiler handles the new Assert. Require and Revert, give some rules of thumb for deciding how and when to use each one. For convenience, I've created a simple contract using each of these features which you can test out in Remix. If you really just want a TLDR, this answer on the Ethereum Stack Exchange should do it. Patterns for error handling in Solidity. The old way. Throw. And the if, throw pattern. Say your contract has a few special functions that should only be callable by a particular address which is designated as the owner. Prior to Solidity 0.4.10, and for a while afterwards, this was a common pattern for enforcing permissions. Contract has an owner. Address owner. Function use superpowers.if, message.sender, equals owner. Throw. / do something only the owner should be allowed to do. Dot. If the use superpowers.function is called by anyone other than owner, the function will throw returning an invalid opcode, error, undoing all state changes, and using up all remaining gas. See this article for more on gas and fees in Ethereum. The throw keyword is now being deprecated, and eventually will be removed altogether. Fortunately, the new functions Assert, Require, and Revert provide the same functionality, with a much cleaner syntax. Life after throw. Let's look at how to update that if, throw, pattern with our new guard functions. This line, if message.sender equals owner, throw, currently behaves exactly the same as all of the following. If message.sender equals owner, Revert semicolon, Assert message.sender equals owner, Require message.sender equals owner. Note that in the Assert. And Require examples, the conditional statement is an inversion of the if blocks condition, switching the comparison operator, exclamation mark equals, to, equals, differentiating between Assert and Require. First, to help separate these guard functions in your mind, imagine Assert. As an overly assertive bully who steals all your gas. Then imagine Require. As a polite managerial type who calls out your errors but is more forgiving. With that mnemonic handy, what's the real difference between these two functions? Prior to the Byzantium network upgrade, Require. And Assert. Actually behave identically, but their bytecode output is slightly different. Assert. Uses the zeros opcode to cause an error condition. Require. Uses the 0xFD opcode to cause an error condition. If you look up either of those opcodes in the yellow paper, you won't find them. This is why you see the invalid opcode error, because there's no specification for how a client should handle them. That will change, however, after Byzantium and the implementation of EIP 140 Revert instruction in the Ethereum virtual machine. Then the 0xFD opcode will be mapped to the Revert instruction. This is what I find really fascinating. Many contracts have been deployed since version 0.4.10, which include a new opcode lying dormant until it's no longer invalid. At the appointed time, it will wake up and become Revert. Note, throw, and Revert. Also use 0xFD. Prior to 0.4.10, throw used zeros. What the Revert opcode will do, Revert will still undo all state changes, but it will be handled differently than an invalid opcode in two ways. It will allow you to return a value. It will refund any remaining gas to the caller. 1. It will allow you to return a value. Most smart contract developers are quite familiar with the notoriously unhelpful invalid opcode error. Fortunately, we'll soon be able to return an error message or a number corresponding to an error type. That will look something like this: Revert something bad happened, or Require condition, something bad happened. Note, Solidity doesn't support this return value argument yet, but you can watch this issue for that update. 2. Refund the remaining gas to the caller. Currently, when your contract throws, it uses up any remaining gas. This can result in a very generous donation to miners, and often ends up costing users a lot of money. Once Revert is implemented in the EVM, it will be plain old bad manners not to use it to refund the excess gas. Choosing between Revert, Assert and Require. So, if Revert.and Require both refund any leftover gas and allow you to return a value, why would want to burn up gas using Assert? The difference lies in the bytecode output, and for this I'll quote from the docs. Emphasis mine. The Require function should be used to ensure valid conditions, such as inputs or contract state variables are met, or to validate return values from calls to external contracts. Fused properly, analysis tools can evaluate your contract to identify the conditions and function calls which will reach a failing assert. Properly functioning code should never reach a failing assert statement. If this happens, there is a bug in your contract which you should fix. To clarify that somewhat, it should be considered a normal and healthy occurrence for a require statement to fail. Same with Revert. When an assert statement fails, something very wrong and unexpected has happened, and you need to fix your code. By following this guidance, static analysis, and formal verification, tools will be able to examine your contracts to find and prove the conditions which could break your contract, or to prove that your contract operates as designed without flaws. In practice, I use a few heuristics to help me decide which is appropriate. Use Require.to validate user inputs EA. Require input less than 20. Validate the response from an external contract EA. Require external. Send amount semicolon. Validate state conditions prior to execution, EA. Require block.number greater than some underscore block underscore number. Or require balance message.sender greater than equals amount. Generally, you should use require. Most often, generally, it will be used towards the beginning of a function. There are many examples of require. In use for such things in our smart contract best practices. Use Revert.to handle the same type of situations as require. But with more complex logic. If you have some complex nested if/else logic flow, you may find that it makes sense to use Revert. Instead of require. Keep in mind though, complex logic is a code smell. Use Assert.to check for overflow/underflow, EA. C equals A plus B, assert C greater than B. Check. Invariance, EA. Assert this. Balance, greater than equals total supply. Validate state after making changes. Prevent conditions which should never, ever be possible. Generally, you will probably use assert. Less often. Generally, it will be used towards the end of a function. Basically, .require. Should be your go-to function for checking conditions. Assert is just there to prevent anything really bad from happening, but it shouldn't be possible for the condition to evaluate to false. Also, you should not use assert blindly for overflow checking, but only if you think that previous checks, either using if or require, would make an overflow impossible. Comment from @Chrysith. Conclusion: these functions are very powerful tools for your security toolbox. Knowing how and when to use them will not only help prevent vulnerabilities, but also make your code more user-friendly and future-proof against upcoming changes. Do you love this stuff? I'm part of the team at Consensus Diligence. If you have a knack for diving deeply into Solidity and the EVM, and an interest in smart contract security, we're looking for people to join our smart contract audit practice. Apply here. If you made it this far in the post, but don't meet the exact criteria in the job description, that's okay. Just include a message mentioning this post and calling out your experience with and interest in Ethereum.